So Santorini I designed in 1985. During midterm exams for mathematics, I got up one morning, and half an hour later I had Santorini, the basic rules, with the only exception that it was on a 4x4 board. And I played 400 games of that over the next summer. And then the God cards gradually came over the next 30 years. I knew immediately this is the best thing I've done in my life. That day I knew that's the best thing.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in game design.
I'm Gordon Hamilton. I'm the designer of Santorini, and I fell in love with game design at age 9. I picked up a copy of Cosmic Encounter, and I didn't only like the game. The game was okay, but what I really enjoyed was designing aliens for that game. So I have about 50 aliens, and I drew the pictures. Like, I'm a bad artist, but I drew the pictures for the aliens, and that was my debut as a board game designer.
And for Cosmic Encounters, for the layperson, when did that come out?
Oh gosh, I guess it was around 1977, roughly.
And it was space theme, I'm assuming?
Yeah, space theme, and there's these planets that you have, and you're trying to make sure that others don't come to your planets. You can still survive on your planets whenever other people come to them. So that's not a problem. But the problem is that the victory condition is whenever you get out into 5 other people's planets. So you want to be careful that you don't let too many people establish bases on your planets.
So is it kind of like Risk except planetary, and or probably more complex than that?
A little bit more complex than Risk, but the real genius of the game was these cards, and you just wanted to play with all of the aliens. They weren't all balanced. With Santorini, I really tried to balance the aliens. I failed in some respects, but I really tried to balance them. In Cosmic Encounters, they threw that out, and they just said, "Oh, we're not interested in balancing because there's some powers that are just like, oh my gosh, they're strong, and there's others that are comparatively weak."
And so you're a young kid. Did your parents see that initial, like, wow, my kid likes games?
So I was a loner in my house loving games. This is one of the best ways to get to be a board game designer, is because I not only had to design games by myself, but I had to play all different roles. Like, I went around the table. If there was hidden information, I would pretend like I didn't even know what I was thinking 10 seconds before. So that was the crazy life of a lonely board game designer.
And how about the art on it? Did you like improve after those initial aliens? Did you like start doing the art for the boards?
The art, I never got better at doing art for my board games. I actually tried to sell Santorini to the Sentry Box, and Gord, the owner of the Sentry Box, actually took, I think, like 20 or 50 copies of Santorini with my artwork on it. It was dreadful. And I still remember I got this guy to cut up blocks of wood, and we call it, like, I wanted an iconic name. This was before the name Santorini. I wanted an iconic name. So I came up with The Block Game. Oh my gosh. It was terrible.
And so when did it transform to Santorini, like the name?
2004. I decided to, I think it was Gavin that suggested I need some theme, and I came up with 2 themes. Gavin from Roxley. And I came up with 2 themes, and one of them was Santorini with all the Greek gods. The other one was Red Square with all of the iconic figures from Soviet Russia. So I thought that they were both good themes, but apparently not. Apparently I made the right choice, that Santorini was going to be the winner.
That's good. So did Gavin kind of go, hey, I like them both, but...
I don't remember if Gavin was really involved at that point. I don't think he was, but he might have been the one who suggested, I think you need a better theme than The Block Game.
So ultimately it was more like about the strategy, and you kind of themed over top of the game itself. as far as like the Santorini and that kind of thing. So when you get into game mechanics, and I want to delve into a little bit of your time with math, Pickle, and math. Have you always been inclined for math?
I was first of all inclined towards board games, and only after board games did I get good at math. My first love was actually mazes. So at age 3, I did a deep dive into mazes, and I did not leave that for 10 years. So if you had asked me mazes, math, or games, it would have been mazes. I would develop mazes, and I would develop three-dimensional mazes. You know those ones that you twiddle 2 knobs to get the labyrinth around? I got rid of the 2 knobs, and I just held the board. And I could come up with fantastic marble mazes that were, it wasn't a problem getting through them. It was timed. That was the limiting factor. It wasn't that you fell down a hole and you had to go back to the start. Okay, that's kind of interesting. But what was really interesting in mine is that it was timed. And so you had this exciting marble maze, and we had races. Oh, I can do it in 50.3 seconds. And someone else could do it in 50.1 seconds. That was great fun. I think a much better model for a maze than this one that you drop through and you return to the beginning.
So after mazes, like what was the next evolution, the big step? Like what got you out of the love of mazes?
Cosmic Encounters then got me out of mazes and into board game, really being interested in board game design. And mathematics only came at about grade 9. Yeah, grade 9. I was still more science than math, but by grade 12, I was in chemistry and math, and they were equal. So I did a double major, chemistry, math. Couldn't decide between the two. But board games were, if I could have made my living with board games back then, ooh, that would have been very tempting.
And isn't it exciting? I mean, I kind of told you about my tabletop role-playing game and the idea. I mean, I've always wanted to do it. As soon as I picked up my first D20, and I don't know how familiar you are with Dungeons and Dragons, but as soon as I played, I want to design a game. And it took me 30 plus years to finally put that nail in the coffin of doing it. But one of the reasons is it's never been more accessible to make your own game. And so you've probably, you've been working on Santorini for how many years now?
So Santorini, I designed in 1985. During midterm exams for mathematics. I got up one morning, and half an hour later I had Santorini, the basic rules, with the only exception that it was on a 4x4 board. And I played 400 games of that over the next summer. And then the God cards gradually came over the next 30 years.
Did you ever at any point go, I need to market this? Or was it always just me and my friends playing?
I knew immediately this is the best thing I've done in my life. That day, I knew that's the best thing. Oh, it still beats my PhD thesis without any doubt. Like 20 times as good. So absolutely, I knew from the start. I tried to market it from the start. I paid money for people to do this, to do that. And I didn't have a lot, and I just kept on trying. And failure after failure after failure, until finally in 2009, I sell the rights to Family Games America. And that was the first, I thought, okay, it's going to happen. They ended up not doing anything with it. And so then Gavin bought back the rights in 2014. Or we didn't buy back the rights, but we had to pay for the trademark that they had taken out. So we got, and then it was all Gavin and Roxley and pure joy at that point. That Gavin's genius, if it wasn't evident before that, with those first visions that he had of Santorini, I thought this is an absolutely beautiful. I couldn't imagine it being more beautiful. The three-dimensional board that he came up with.
And so when you look back upon that and failure after failure, how many friends, family, always where you're like, okay, maybe it's time to give that up and do other things?
It was always me who gave it up because I was also pretty passionate about mathematics. So it wasn't like I was suffering. I loved mathematics. I loved chemistry. So I tried, and then I would just go, okay, and I got into something else. Or I would get into designing another game. Like I was quite prolific in game design in the 1990s. They're all in my basement. I haven't done anything with them. But I was very prolific, and I loved that design process.
And when you say you have like all these prototypes or ideas downstairs, are there any that you go, okay, this one's next?
Oh, there's like 50 that are next, of course. But I'm always most excited about the next idea, about the next one. So it's my big problem. It's true for Math Pickle. It's true for my board game design. It's true for all walks of my life. Is I know I have to put some energy into publishing this stuff, but instead I've got another idea. And I jump into that idea, and I'm so enthusiastic, and I write it down. Now I'm mostly on the computer. I do Keynote, and I write down all my ideas. I get images, and I really work on game design through Keynote.
So the actual process is what really is driving the process of actually designing is first and foremost at the heart of it all.
I am by far an ideas person and not a business person, not someone who can have the discipline to take those ideas and to say, let's finish them off. Let's finish off at least one a year. I just don't have that discipline. I end up just so excited about the next thing. And that's just me. Yeah.
And tell us about Math Pickle a little bit. I just want to delve into that area of it's a free service, correct? Maybe just tell us about it, and then I'll ask you how it kind of came to be, or if you can trail that on at the end.
Yeah. So Math Pickle is my joyous endeavor to bring beautiful puzzles to children worldwide. And those puzzles are two different types. There's the unsolved problems of mathematics that are pedagogic gems. You might think, how on earth can kids tackle unsolved problems of mathematics? And they won't solve them. But there's vignettes of success, little things. Oh, I could solve this part of it, and I could solve this part of it. And you choose those unsolved problems really wisely. And the kids, if you're just struggling in math, well, you can still just work on addition. In grade 2, you can work on this grade 2 problem from 1916, integer partitions. It's just addition. But if you are a top kid in that same grade 2 classroom, that exact same puzzle has not been solved once you go from 2 bubbling cauldrons to 3. It's still possible to solve. I haven't had a grade 2 student solve it in 45 minutes, but they could just about solve it. They're really the ones that are really right there. For 4 pots, it took a computer program a long time to solve it. And for 6 pots, it's totally unsolved. And I don't imagine it's going to be solved anytime soon.
And so why did you do that? Why did you want to help kids?
I did not know that I wanted to be an educator. I went through an academic program in chemistry and mathematics. I never clued in that actually I'm not a great mathematician. I wasn't a great chemist, but I'm creative. And I talk kid language. I can sit down in a kindergarten classroom. I can get down on the floor. I go really low, so I'm looking up at the kindergarten students. And I just love that. I love thinking how they're thinking, and I love improving. Okay, I love giving them failures right in kindergarten. I say, no, that's you can't do that. You can see what happened. We have to come up with something else. So giving them experiences of failure at a very young age, that has to be built into our mathematics education system. And mathematics is definitely where you want to build it in. Failure in poetry. What does that mean? Everything is fuzzy. Even in science, there's fuzziness. The great gift of mathematics and physical education, Physical education, you either make that basket or you don't. Mathematics, you either get that or you don't get it and you failed. Those are the two areas that you teach kids the resilience to get up, brush yourself off after a failure, and try again. And math class can be so much fun if it's approached in that way that the teacher goes in, and the teacher maybe is a good problem solver, but has the teacher solved this problem? No. So we're going to work on this together. I go in all the time. I don't know the answer to this problem, and I fail sometimes. That's really exciting for the kids to see me fail. For younger grades, for kindergarten through grade 4, I would pretend to fail, and kids just lap it up, and I'll pretend to be a total goof in the classroom, like a clown, saying, we did it, and of course they see that I didn't do it, that there's a mistake, and I let the kids say, no, you didn't do it. And I'm just going, yes, we got it, and I'm all excited, and then I go, oh, did we not get it? Oh, darn it. So I model failure. I just have so much fun in the classroom. I've learned pedagogic techniques by myself, but I've also learned from teachers. And I think it's really rich for teachers to be with me in the classroom because they've come at this through a very different perspective. I'm coming at it through mathematics, the love of mathematics, and they're coming at it for the most part because they love kids. And it's really interesting, the two of us getting together.
And so when you think about board games, the mechanics of board games often are based upon math. Is this almost like a perfect fit for learning?
So mathematics and board games are totally bedfellows. They need to be together. And the best thing that you can do as a parent is to have a culture of board gaming in your home. That's the best way to help your kid in the math classroom. It's not sitting down and doing worksheets. I guarantee that the best problem solving that your kid experiences in a year is through a board game, through trying to beat you as the parent, trying to beat you in a board game. That's the best problem solving. And really what we want, number one thing, what we want in the math classroom in elementary school is just to get kids to think rigorously. Number two is addition, multiplication, division, all of that stuff. But number one is to think rigorously. And there is no other subject that is so perfectly created to get kids to think to get kids to think rigorously as mathematics.
And hats off to you for helping out some kids, because I struggled with math, and I always used to play Dungeons and Dragons in school, and I'd always we'd convince the teacher it's math, we're carrying gold pieces and we're rolling dice and counting it, and so they'd kind of begrudgingly go, oh, okay, we'll let you play at recess or whatever. But I always found games in general, just it's a fun way to learn, in the creativity that gets spawned from that.
I'm working right now with newyorkplays.org, and they have 300 kids and they have 8 dungeon masters, and I'm looking at integrating mathematics into a dungeon crawler. So that I think that these two are really matched. I think if I can do it seamlessly, I'm going to make the kids just think they're in an average dungeon, and then they're going to be hit with this problem, and they're just going to, how am I going to solve this? And the type of problems that I want to have are those that you can solve it in a bad way quite easily. But to solve it optimally, even a mathematician is going to go, I don't know how to do that optimally. I have to think about that. So that's the kind of experience. And if the kids solve it pretty well, then they're going to get magic potions and special swords and all that. And if they don't solve it so well, they're probably going to be snuffed out reasonably quickly. And the whole idea is to probably all groups get snuffed out in about 2 hours. So it's going to be an exciting thing to watch, is how far are these kids going to get? So that's the idea.
In the OSR, I don't know if you're familiar with that, the old school revival of Dungeons and Dragons. It's getting back to the original roots of Dungeons and Dragons, and what they call that is the funnel. you start off with sometimes like you make 2 or 3 characters that are easy to make. You don't think they're going to survive, and you just go into the dungeon, and then you might have one at the end.
Okay.
They call it the funnel. So like you might start with 4, but by the end you've got that one, and then that's my character. I guess I'll keep using him.
Right.
The funnel. So the next question I have for you is the Sentry Box. Like, how long have you been in Calgary?
I've been in Calgary since 1972.
So you've been here for like a long time. So do you remember the first time in all the different iterations of the Sentry Box?
I remember the Sentry Box on Crowchild Trail. I remember going into that store and rummaging around and thinking, this is really interesting. I want to learn about that. It was mostly board games, mostly war games at that point. They had a huge war game collection. And the rest of it, I don't remember so well. I don't remember if I picked up Cosmic Encounters there. But I certainly remember the little store, and it was small. It was really tiny.
And then do you remember the next jump that they made? Or like, did you follow them from each jump?
I don't remember them until they moved to the current location then.
Okay. Yeah. And so the current location, obviously a big step up from that little tiny shack. And when you kind of realized that was them, that was now in a big place, kind of what was your initial thoughts?
I went in there and just said, oh my gosh, look at the size of this place. Look at the games that we can, like, just browsing there was such a joy. And you see somebody at the other end of the store looking at a game, and you can't help but go up and say, yeah, that's a good game. But this one here's that one, if you like this kind of game. So it's just like, it's so tempting to get in there. And now the Sentry Box staff is very knowledgeable. There's other stores that you go into in the world, and the staff isn't maybe quite as knowledgeable. So there you're even more tempted to go in and say, hey, look at this game here. Yeah.
And then they ask if you work there.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you remember though, like when they started doing the renovations or the decorative part of it? I always say, like, I came from BC 7 years ago. I walked in there just on a walk. I happened to see the Sentry Box, and I was like my homing pigeon kind of went, huh, there's something interesting in there. And I went in there, and the first time I walked in there, I was just like, how did this place exist for 3 years in Calgary? And I did not know that it existed at that point. And do you remember like the first time that like the decorations happened, and like it's like a Willy Wonka factory in there almost?
I never saw the decorations. I was focused 100% on the game, on the games on the floor. So I can't tell you the first thing. I'm totally, I don't know if they went up last year or if they went up 10 years ago. I couldn't tell you, because for me the interest is definitely in the games, and I'm blind to what space. Like, they could have dirt floors, and I couldn't tell you when the dirt floors were taken out. Like, I don't know. I was just so focused on those shelf loads of games.
And so when the Eurogame trend started, and the store was obviously stocking them, was that like just a light bulb went off for how many people that started enjoying that type of game?
The real light bulb went off for me whenever I was visiting Hong Kong one year, and I went to a board game cafe. I was trying to find it on the map. I ended up at the bottom of a skyscraper with nothing looking like a board game cafe, and I looked confused, and someone came up to me, and I said, board game cafe, 11th floor. So I went up to the 11th floor, and the demographic there was young people, stacks of young people, out on dates, out on parties. Like, it was the entire 11th floor of the skyscraper was board games, and drinking coffee and looking out on Hong Kong. That was a revolutionary moment.
And did you go, we need this back in Canada?
Yeah, but the Hexagon Board Game Cafe was also quite similar at that time, and that I think that happened just afterwards. So very, very quickly, Calgary took off with board game cafes.
And why do you think? So Roxley Games and yourself and Oren, and I think you passed along a couple other names to me just recently today after we talked. Why do you think it's become a hotbed of game design?
I think you just need a critical mass, and that just happens randomly. And yeah, like why Calgary? I don't think it's the air. I don't think it's the water. I think it's just a random confluence of people who are interested, and that maybe stimulates other people. Maybe the Game Artisans of Canada started here, and the Sentry Box perhaps was a big part of that. Like, how else would we have met each other? So that's very possible that the reason is the Sentry Box.
I know I asked Gord this question. Are you familiar with the movie It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
So George Bailey, he wishes he's dead, and then he gets to see the world without him. And I said, Gord, what do you think Calgary would be like without the Sentry Box, or if you hadn't started or built up the Sentry Box? What would it be like? And he's pretty stoic and humble. But do you kind of have any idea of like what a gap in this culture of Calgary it would be?
Yeah, without the Sentry Box, I can imagine that the Game Artisans of Canada might not have formed here. It might have formed in Toronto or Vancouver very easily, and it could have formed 10 years later. So I think the Sentry Box was probably an absolutely essential factor in when and where it happened.
And why did you guys form that group? Like, what was the onus behind that? Like, what was the impetus that you went, we need to do this?
It was just people passionate about board game design and just wanting to get together and perfect each other's designs. Some game designs lend themselves to solo play, like Santorini. I can sit around and optimize cards by myself, which is mostly what I did. I didn't do that with other people. But whenever I'm trying to design a complex game, you need to be with other people, and you need to have your ideas shot down regularly, and you need to be challenged regularly. That's just healthy board game design. You can't get ego attached to your ideas. You need to have them just flicked and you just need to admit, oh, maybe that's not as good as I could do. So that's really healthy.
And so with that critiquing and building your skills, you get toughened and hardened to like, okay, this will work, this won't work, and start from the drawing board. Do you think that the group really helped rise everybody as game designers?
Yeah, I think that once the Game Artisans of Canada got into its groove, which was very fast, we gave sharp criticism to each other. And you need honesty, you need brutal honesty. That's the best way to be a friend as a board game designer. Otherwise, you end up creating mediocre stuff. So right away, you come into our group, and many people are a little bit shocked because we're such nice guys on the surface, but you get us talking about board game design and we can be quite pointed.
And so what was the kind of the schedule? Like, did you guys meet weekly, monthly, every couple of weeks? How did the artisans meet?
It grew to be weekly, 6:30 p.m. at the Sentry Box. So that's where it grew into. It started out more haphazard than that.
And so when you would meet, would you like grab random people to go, hey, you need to come and play this? Or like, was it just the artisans themselves?
It was just the artisans. But whenever we started meeting at the Sentry Box, often we would have people come by and say, oh, what's this? And it's obviously a cardboard prototype, and many people haven't seen a game in preparation. And we say, you're welcome to join us and give your honest feedback. And people did that.
did anybody get into the Artisans just from those random encounters, or like how did the group grow? Like as far as over time, did people go, I like what these people are doing, I want to be part of it?
I'm sure that there were people who joined like that, or at least heard of our group like that, just by walking up, seeing you're working on a game. What's that? And then maybe they go home and they start, oh, I could design a game. Or maybe they've already had a game in mind and they just say, okay, I have to come here. So yeah, I can remember some people coming up and saying, I've got a game. I said, bring it along. You have to pay your dues first. You have to sit through other people's games. You have to give them honest feedback first, and then bring your game. And that way they get to see that we're not polite with anybody. We're not here to make friends. We're here to be brutally honest. And that's much better than saying, yeah, come next week and share your game. Because then they're going to come next week, share their game, and just be, it's just going to be not a good experience for them.
And then I guess kind of just wrapping it up, as far as you obviously had a successful Kickstarter after, like, you kind of like talk about the evolution of like when you finally went, okay, we're taking the next level to Santorini and building it up. Can you just talk about that process?
Well, Santorini went from being a niche product with my very minimalistic, totally white version of Santorini. These were tiles and everything was white. It went from that to Gavin's version. I looked at that and I just thought, well, here we've got the right game with the right aesthetic to appeal to a very young set of kids. And at that time, I was actually bringing Santorini into a kindergarten classroom with big blocks playing on a 2x4 board, not a 5x5. But the kids actually stood on the blocks. So I knew that it would work down to 5-year-olds because I did that regularly with 5-year-olds. But I never thought of matching that experience with the aesthetic. And Gavin's genius to do that. That was, I just looked at that first bit of artwork coming out and that was more exciting to me than the Kickstarter, seeing Gavin's inspiration for Santorini. Because at that point, I knew everything else. Like I could predict this game is going to have long legs because I know the mechanisms are beautiful. Now I know the game is beautiful looking. So, the Kickstarter at that point, I knew I could have written the script from that point forward, seeing Gavin's design.
And so just reflecting upon, once again, if I can get you back to your Cosmic Encounter days and go, did you ever think that, and I assume you're making a nice living from your, if not a nice supplemental part of your income from the game design world, and did you ever think that was ever going to happen?
Yeah, it's being successful as a board game designer, having spent 31 years trying and failing, let me tell you, that's a sweet way to have a midlife non-crisis. I can tell you, it's the opposite. I had a midlife euphoria. I'm coming up to 57 years old now, and let me tell you, that remains one of the highlights of my life, having Santorini take off. Yeah. And it's so fun being able to walk anywhere in the world, go into a game store, and I was in Serbia. I was in, so that's Novi Sad in Serbia. Went walking into a game store, said, hi, I'm the designer of Santorini. And it was just, they got people in. I was signing copies. I'm in Zagreb the next week. The same thing. It's just so much fun. I'm in Trail, BC, taking my kids skiing. And I go to the Sasquatch board game lounge. And I'm walking down the street and these two guys are out having tea and they're the owners. And I just said, yeah, I'm the designer. It was in the window. I'm the designer of Santorini. And they wanted to get their picture taken with me. And my kids were right there. So it's really special, that kind of experience. Really, really fun.